Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive EV live on YouTube. First stream of 2023. Hope you had a happy new year. Hope you had a safe one. And we're kicking it off with Tesla announcing a new day, a new event, I guess, if you will, being hosted at Giga Texas that will be live streamed for the public. Certain shareholders can be selected at random, I guess, or depending on how important of a shareholder you are, and will be invited to attend personally or publicly, I guess you could say, at the event. But yeah, this is a weird one. I don't think Tesla's ever done an official investor day, but surprisingly, it seems kind of last minute. It's like AI day or autonomy day or battery day were all announced like months and months in advance. This is investor day happening to it was announced 2 months, less than 2 months before it actually takes place, because I guess February is the shorter month. So March 1st basically is when this is taking place, and Tesla's wording on the website is that our investors will be able to see our most advanced production line as well as discuss long-term expansion plans, Generation 3 platform, capital allocation, and other subjects with our leadership team, which is kind of interesting. So I'm curious if this is a direct response from all of the basically people that are super mad at Elon and mad at Tesla because of the stock price being down, and they think that Tesla and their board needs to do something about it. And, there's been a lot of talk on Twitter on, we need these random people who manage investment funds and index funds to be represented on Tesla's board, which I don't understand why they think they can change anything personally. I don't think the stock is really that tied based on to what the board does. Ultimately, what I think is best for investors is for Tesla to just deliver and to scale and to focus on profitability. You're basically prioritizing the business as a whole, which is expanding EV production like they have been, increasing investment into things that will increase production, like lithium refining or new factory locations, which we thought they were going to announce last year, and they didn't. So to be honest, I'm kind of nervous for Investor Day, because to me, this is kind of like Tesla as a company publicly saying this is meant to be for our investors. This is supposed to make people feel comfortable that they invested in Tesla stock. And in my opinion, that tends to result in just a lot of talk, a lot of claims. I don't really think there needs to be a day specifically for investors. I guess maybe you want to ask Tesla how their Bitcoin investment is doing. Wonder how that pulled out. Or whether or not Tesla should do stock buybacks and that kind of thing. Or should they just sit on cash? So I'm kind of nervous as to what a dedicated event for this means. I've seen some people just extrapolate, well, if there's an investor day and they said that they're going to talk about the Generation 3 platform, this means they're going to unveil Gen 3, which basically Gen 1 is Model S and X, Gen 2 is Model 3 and Y, Gen 3 is essentially how do we design a vehicle that can be half the price of the Model 3 and Y, that takes half the floor space and half the price to build and produce. I personally don't think it's going to be that in detail. I think that the fact that they're saying we'll discuss Generation 3 platform doesn't mean we're going to get an unveiling. Otherwise, why wouldn't we call this a robotaxi unveiling or a new Tesla model unveiling? It's weird to call it an investor day if they were actually going to unveil new designs or something. I don't think that's what it's going to be, but that's probably what a lot of people are expecting it to be. So personally, I'm a bit skeptical. I'm a bit nervous because my guess is that, of course, Elon's going to be there, and it's basically just going to be one big stock pump of robotaxis. It's going to be ready later this year. It's going to print money for us, and the bot is coming, and the bot's going to displace all these jobs, and it's going to take over. And I'm like, I I think after all of the timelines you've missed with robotaxis, you should really walk back any type of timeline with that and just wait until it's actually happening before you start claiming that it's going to be this giant moneymaker, because oh my God, the number of timelines. Wasn't it early 2022 when Elon was saying, I know I said this a lot, and I know it's kind of a meme now, but I really think we're going to be ready for robotaxis by the end of 2022. And it's like, here we are, 2023, and it's like, okay, wide release of FSD beta, but that's not all that really is kind of a fun, it's a techie thing. It's fun to watch the car try to drive itself, but it's not like Robotaxi levels of revenue that a lot of people were expecting. Shareholders and investors, how do you plan on raising funds and growing more as a company? Tesla. Why? Pretty much. Like, I don't think we need a day. All that you can really do at investor days or battery days is talk. You can't really deliver or announce that much, at least in Tesla's experience. They never really unveil or announce that much, like, game-changing stuff. It's always just like, here's what we're working on. It's going to get better. Right now it's not great, but we promise it'll be much better in the future. They should sell Bitcoin and buy back with it. Oh, brother. I think they get to write off their Bitcoin investment as a loss, technically, so not a big deal. Do you think Cybertruck will start production investor day? No, not at all. Not at all. There is no new Cybertruck news. The GigaPress has not even fully arrived yet, and once all the parts arrive, it takes several weeks or several months to get the parts assembled. Then it takes several months to calibrate the GigaPress to make sure that it's working properly and that the castings are, structurally sound. At this point, I have very, very little doubt in Cybertruck delivery starting mid-2023. At this point, the longer we go between seeing the GigaPress not being installed, every day that goes by that I don't see it installed makes me think, yeah, it might not happen this year, honestly. There's just such a long process. But yeah, I think that Investor Day is mostly just going to be a lot of talking about how robotaxis and the bot are going to make lots of money in the future, but we're just not ready to deploy them yet. And that the Generation 3 platform will probably just be talking about simplifying parts, simplifying manufacturing. It would be nice if they went into more detail on, like, we're going to do just rear-wheel drive only, or we're not going to include certain things like, obviously steering wheel and pedals, but maybe not even have an interior display or not have to worry about a frunk, or, how having no side view mirrors helps with aerodynamics or what have you. But to me, that the announcement itself sounds very vague, which makes me think that the presentation is going to be very vague. Is Gen 3 the Cybertruck and 25K car? I don't think so. The way they've talked about it in previous earnings calls, Gen 3 is supposed to be just the next step of low cost of ownership. So, like, Roadster was intentionally high priced to make room to run at a profit so that they could make the Model S and X, which were a little bit lower price, and then they use those profits to make the Model 3 and Y, and then they use those profits. But I think the Cybertruck is technically like its own separate thing. No, I don't think they will announce Cybertruck pricing at the event. Tesla didn't even announce Model Y pricing at the Giga Texas delivery event. And they didn't announce Tesla Semi pricing at the Tesla Semi delivery event. So this is not a delivery event. Why would there be pricing at it? I'm going to say, like, zero chance. Do you think they will... So sorry, I just read that. That'd be a waste of time since they already talked about bots and robotaxi. I agree, Youngmin. That's my point. I find it a waste of time, and I'm not convinced that this is going to be a very insightful day. It's just, like, what does that mean, Investor Day? It's just, like, convince people that they should keep their stock and not sell it. Like, I don't know. This feels more like boardroom decision. Like, a bunch of people were like, a lot of people think that the Tesla board doesn't care about investors. Okay, let's have a day for them. Let's designate a day just for the investors. And it's like, it's basically like trying to bring back a PR move of just like, no, guys, we're serious. We're going to do good. I promise. It's like, for investors, what they want is results, not talk. We've had plenty of talk. And I feel like when you have these big events and days, which honestly haven't proven to be very productive in my opinion, almost everything that was announced at Battery Day has needed to be thrown out at this point. Like, at Battery Day, they said there'd be a $25,000 passenger car. Now in the earnings calls, when people ask about the passenger car, they're like, no, you're not focusing on the right thing. The key is robotaxi. It's not about selling a $25,000 vehicle. It's about making autonomous vehicles that have very low cost per mile. And then the other thing they announced at Battery Day was the Plaid Model S, and they said that it would have 520 miles of range, and then they walked that back and were like, actually, 4680 sales aren't quite ready for that yet. Plaid with 1865 cells, that's good enough. And at first they were like 4680 cells, way cheaper to produce, way less cobalt, way better energy density, we'll get range improvements with the structural battery pack. Then the 4680 Model Y came out, it has worse energy density than 2170 cells, it uses more cobalt, the weight isn't any better. I'm like, it was cool and it was exciting to have that big presentation. Here's how we plan to scale to 3 terawatt hours. But now, after most recent Twitter Space conversations with Elon, he's saying they're targeting more like 2 terawatt hours. So I'm like, okay, it's cool, but also if your goal is just to boost the stock, Battery Day didn't boost the stock. The stock actually went down shortly after Battery Day took place. So I don't view this as, oh, this is where the stock is going to skyrocket. It's like, results are what matters for the company, in my opinion, not like presentations, but because they've said that Generation 3 is going to be discussed, now everyone's going to go into this event expecting robo-taxis to be announced, and I don't know. The AI days, too. There's been several AI days, and it's always like really technically impressive to get a bunch of engineers up there that are just like, hey, this is really advanced algorithms and really impressive machine learning, and it's like, yeah, it is. It's very intricate and complicated, but are we going to keep having AI days year after year, expecting that one of these days they're going to get robo-taxis right, but they still don't want to assume any liability? Got to keep your hand right there on the wheel. Yes, I'll do a video on the Aptera Delta model, but I did check it out. That's coming. When do I think Model 3 cost will reduce and what Tesla should do to make it happen? I think that that's actually one of the primary things Tesla's going to be focused on with the Model 3 revamp, like Reuters has talked about Project Highland. I don't think they're really going to change much with the interior, even though that's what Reuters is saying. I think the main reason they want to refresh the Model 3 is to switch it to single-piece castings, which is a pretty big difference, in my opinion. Like, if you've seen in their shareholder deck, see, that's fine. Just release the shareholder deck. You don't need to... Shareholder decks are, in my opinion, more insightful than investor days or battery day. Just publish what you got, and you don't need to hype it up with a live stream and a presentation where people ask dumb questions and they go up and ask the same questions that have already been answered a million times. You have investors go up and go, so with Dojo being super fast, do you think you could license out Dojo? And for the 5th time, they'll go, sure, next question. And then someone goes, how far away is robo-taxis? And then Elon goes, probably end of this year, maybe early next year, and pending regulatory approval. Ha! And when we all wait, and then we all forget about it, and then they miss their timelines again. I'm just tired of these presentations that don't really have much substance. It's like, just include it in the earnings call. I think that's enough. That can be your investor day. We get an investor day once a quarter. So I think that Model 3 is going to get single-piece castings, which, again, as they show in the shareholder deck, it requires substantially less robots on the factory floor if you don't have to have all of these individual pieces welded together. The Model 3 front and rear pieces, underbodies, take like over 70 different components, and maybe they can find a way to switch to like a BYD Blade battery that's iron phosphate based and structural. I think those two things would be really key, making a structural battery pack that's LFP, because it doesn't require nickel, doesn't require cobalt, so the chemistry is cheaper and the cycle life is long and it requires less parts, and that will in return allow you to produce more of them because it requires less floor space and you can run the assembly line faster. And I think also couple that with just demand weakening in regards to the entire automotive market. Model 3 prices will probably come down. Right now, Model 3 rear-wheel drive still qualifies for the federal tax credit, which again is not a point-of-sale rebate. It is $7,500 off of your taxes, and that'll change come March. So it qualifies for January and February, but March is a whole different ballgame. So I think that switching to castings and more structural battery packs on the Model 3 will let them build it for cheaper. Let's see. How long have you had your Tesla, and do you notice any battery degradation? Does it concern you planning long-term? No, because I got lithium iron phosphate. That's the better chemistry, in my opinion. It's a bit less energy dense, but I don't think range in EVs is as crucial as a lot of people make it out to be. I think a lot of people have convinced themselves that based on gas car range, they need to have a consistent 300, 400 mile range. And in reality, when you actually start road tripping with an EV, you'll probably start realizing that max range number is not that important because you very rarely ever hit it, especially if you don't have LFP. But no, yeah, I've had it we're coming up on 4.5 months now. On January 24th, it'll be 5 months for me. Not any real noticeable battery degradation. I mean, some people like to see what the car states its range is at 100%, which is not entirely accurate, and you shouldn't base battery health on that. But mine still says, I think, 268, and when I had the car brand new, it said 273. So always keep in mind that the most degradation happens in the first year, and then it levels out. But LFP is rated to have a much higher cycle life than nickel based batteries do. So no, I'm not concerned about it at all. Personally, I would have been fine with a 240 mile range Model Y. We were really tempted to buy that one when it was available, the standard range Model Y rear-wheel drive. But this is still got plenty of range for me. And again, on road trips, you're just charging until you can reach your next stop. Charging speed and charging network reliability, far, far more important than max range, in my opinion. You can have really good range, but like the Chevy Bolt has great range in my opinion, but the charging speed absolutely butchers the total trip time. It's like, okay, it can go 250 miles on a charge. That's great. But if it only can max charge at 50 kilowatts, then it's not going to matter. You're still going to have to stop for extended periods of time. Public charging infrastructure does suck. I agree. Presentation on what investors want to be informed. Presentation on what? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, basically the blog post said that we'll be able to see their most advanced production line, which I guess is at Giga Texas, and discuss long-term expansion plans, Generation 3 platform. So thank you for the super chat, Taker. I'll answer that in a second. Basically, based on the blog post that Tesla made about Investor Day, it sounds like my hope is actually, I'm more interested in the first thing they listed, their most advanced factory line. My hope is that they've figured out the kinks on 4680, at least some of the kinks. I don't think they've, like, suddenly it's all the energy density they want. My guess is that 4680 cells, they found a way to make them cheap, but they haven't found a way to make them cheap and energy dense. So it's probably going to be we can make lots of 4680 cells now, and they don't cost very much, especially with the structural battery pack. My hope is that the all-wheel drive standard range Model Y with the structural battery pack, that's going to be ready. Like, it would explain where all these 4680 cells were going if within the next couple months they brought that back to the online configurator, and that's at a lower price. So they finally introduce a cheaper Model Y on the configurator. It's not just for employees. It's not just for accelerated delivery. Basically, everybody will be able to order it. Maybe the wait time is a little bit longer because they're still kind of ramping up, but hopefully that's what they discuss, is like, this is our most advanced assembly line, is the 4680 structural pack on the Model Y. And back when that was available, it was $62,000. Still not great, to be honest. But my theory is, as Tesla is catching up with demand, as the federal tax credit, I think, caused a lot of confusion, at least in the EV community. I saw a lot of people who had no idea what they were talking about. But my guess, based on the end of year discounts, I don't think it was necessarily a demand problem, because Tesla was not officially cutting prices or adding Teslas back to the referral program. So you're not officially cutting prices, but you are providing incentives to taking delivery sooner, which to me is an indication that there was a lot of people trying to delay delivery for this year. And now that the tax credit's actually here and it kind of sucks, I'm betting that there's a lot of disappointment and a lot of people not buying the trim they thought they were going to buy. So because it's going to be very cheap to produce the structural battery pack, and they found a way to scale 4680s affordably, my prediction is that they can get that 4680 Model Y. I don't feel super concrete in this prediction. I'm speculating here, but they'll be able to get this new Giga Texas made Model Y to $55K so that it qualifies for the federal tax credit. And then Tesla will be able to boast about how, well, when you factor in potential savings, it's actually a bit cheaper than 55K. I don't think it'll even qualify for the full 7,500 though. I think a lot of people are missing that. Like if your battery pack doesn't have a certain percentage of materials mined in North America, then you only get half the tax credit, and it doesn't turn into a point of sale rebate until 2024. But in 2024, the requirements for the battery materials goes up. So I'm almost convinced that the Model 3 rear-wheel drive won't qualify at all because the battery pack is completely imported, which is a bit of a bummer because it's the cheapest Tesla. So you would hope, like, hey, cheapest Tesla, get tax credit, super cheap Tesla, great. And I would love that too because I love this Model 3, and I think factoring in cost, it's the best Tesla you can buy. But relying on the LFP battery pack is basically going to disqualify it, and I don't know if the 4680 cells are getting enough raw materials from North America. But thank you for the super chat taker. He says Ram debuts their EV in just 2 days. World beater? I don't know what the definition of world beater is. I think it'll be cool. I'm hoping that it can live up to the hype. They've been kind of teasing 500-mile range, and very few EVs I think are actually going to be able to deliver on that. Rivian's not even announced that they're going to try to hit 500. They're barely going to hit 400. And the Cybertruck claimed 500, but it's not anywhere close to coming out. I don't know how close the Ram is to actually shipping, but yeah, I'm excited to see it. I hope it has a big emphasis on aerodynamics and efficiency, because that's the best way to get 500-mile range. If it's not aerodynamic, that's going to be a massive battery pack to get it to 500, which is going to drive the price way up or the availability way down, which in return drives the price way up. So yeah, I'm interested. I'm excited for it. Let's see. Oh, you guys are talking a lot. EVs need to diversify. I mean, it would be nice if they did, but I just don't think that's a huge problem right now. It's availability, I think, is the bigger... And affordability. I think there's a lot of EVs people want. They just can't afford them, or they can't find them because they're low in supply or high in price. Need more types of vehicles, less vanity projects. I don't agree with that personally. I don't think the types of vehicles would increase sales. I think the vehicles themselves are very high in demand, particularly the Cybertruck. It's just a matter of actually making them, which is why I'm not too pumped about Investor Day, because I'm like, this isn't about you can't really deliver on things at an Investor Day. All you can do is talk and make promises, which if you don't trust Tesla to follow through on their promises, then you're not going to believe anything they say at an Investor Day. Or if you do trust Tesla and their promises about bot and robotaxi, why do you need an Investor Day? What else is there to talk about? EVs need charging infrastructure, which there isn't besides Tesla. Yeah, EA is incredibly unreliable, unfortunately. EV Go and ChargePoint also are in many places. Maintaining is key. Yeah, it's just they're so annoying that they all require an app, and not having them baked into the software, I think, is a real big difference. If like you're just navigating on a trip and your map tells you that there's a charge point there, but then you get there and it's offline, having that first party integration, I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but I personally think that first party charging solutions are going to win. I don't think that a lot of people have this mindset of, well, right now the charging infrastructure is bad, but eventually it'll be just like gas cars and you can just charge wherever you want. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think, like, if we had a government that could agree on a standard and a protocol for all batteries and chargers to communicate with in a connector shape, I'd agree with you. But they can't even get the connector down, and that's just one piece of the puzzle. Like, the bigger problem that we're seeing with EA and even EVgo and ChargePoint too is disagreements of protocol. Like, batteries need to be able to communicate with the charge station, and because road tripping is a lot of the time dictated in EVs by where can you charge, how fast can you charge, is that charger available, that type of data is always going to be easier for the first party to access and put in the car than the third party. So I think it's a really good move that Tesla started early with the supercharging network and has continued to scale it up extremely quick, because I think that basically is going to give them a permanent advantage on anybody. I don't see anyone passing them in that. because they found a way to make reliable fast chargers cheap, and they deploy them very, very quickly. And I don't think that I don't see anybody else that can catch up with that, to be honest. Code Universe says, what would you like to see on Investor Day? I guess like real products, I guess. And I'm worried that Investor Day, especially because they say it's going to be about the Gen 3 platform, is just going to be all about promises. And for good and for bad, Tesla changes things constantly. They're constantly iterating, they're constantly improving, and that's a good thing in a lot of ways because you don't have to wait for a certain model year. As soon as Tesla finds a better battery or a different part or a different component that's cheaper or more efficient, they tend to switch to it as quickly as possible, and that's great. But the downside is when you do these big events like your AI days, like your autonomy days, like your battery days, all of that information that you're talking about, how this is our plan for the next 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, all of that doesn't hold up very well when you're changing plans on a monthly basis. Like, so much of what they said at Battery Day doesn't hold up anymore. Like, you can't say that the 4680 cells allow for all of these range improvements when they're not, and you can't say that it allows for less cobalt when it doesn't. And you can't say that it is gonna... Back at Battery Day, which was held in 2020, they said that within 3-ish years, we were going to have a $25,000 passenger car. And now, anytime you ask Tesla about the $25,000 car, they're like, why do you care about that? Like, what? We're not even thinking about that anymore. It's like, well, it's because this is what you told us at the big Investor Day thing. You know, the big Battery Day was like, this is what's coming. And also 520-mile range Plaid Model S. And then down the road, they're like, you know what? Nah, we don't need that. 350-mile Model S is good enough, and we'll charge more for that one. So it's those kinds of like constantly changing goals and moving goalposts that I'm like, I don't think this is helping you. If anything, I think this is just kind of hurting you. And it's like the people that trust Tesla don't need to hear all this information again. And the people that don't trust Tesla are still not going to trust Tesla after they have an Investor Day. So yeah, that's why I'm not like I'm not super excited about it, but I would love to see them talk more about what they figured out at Giga Texas. Like, to me, the best case scenario would be we figured out how to build 4680s at scale, and maybe like kind of like the Tesla Semi delivery event, they don't talk about the things that weren't good news. You know, I have a feeling that the payload capacity of the Tesla Semi, at least right now, is not very good. And that's why they didn't talk about it. But that was a very big question that a lot of people had. And, you know, a lot of, even back in 2017, when they announced the Tesla Semi, everyone was complaining the weight of the tractor is going to impact the payload. What is the weight? What is the weight? And some people said it's this, and some said it's this. Tesla didn't come forward and disclose, here's what the weight is. We still don't really know. There's people that are trying to extrapolate it based on cargo that they see in the Semi, but then Pepsi makes comments about how the chip, the Tesla Semis carrying potato chips can go a lot further than the Semis carrying the Pepsi soda, and everyone's like, whoa, the payload, and, you know. So similar with the Investor Day, if the 4680 cells don't have the energy density you want, don't talk about energy density. Just talk about the good news. And the good news, hopefully, and my prediction, is that, okay, here at the 4680 factory at Giga Texas, you know, that, what is it, northwestern side of the factory, we have figured out a way to produce these cells, and it costs less to build than what 2170 cells would cost in energy equivalents, right? And because of that, we can now offer the 4680 Model Y. They won't call it that, but we'll implement these batteries into the structural battery pack on the all-wheel drive standard range Model Y, which we can now offer at lower prices and still have good margins, and this increases our addressable market. To me, I guess that's my best case scenario, because that doesn't need any kind of magical equipment to show up in the last 6 weeks. Like, I don't think that's why I'm not a believer that, like, oh, they're going to surprise us and Cybertruck's all of a sudden going to be ready. It's like, no, physically it's just not ready. But they are building Model Ys. They do have the 4680 battery plant there that's producing cells, but they haven't said whether or not they're using the cells from Giga Texas yet. That would be a cool announcement. And introducing that Model Y at a more affordable price. That's like tangible, and the investor day could be a good time to announce, like, yeah, this is possible and it's profitable, and we're going to continue to scale this up in more factories. And Berlin is going to build 4680s for their market as well, and the range is not going to be very good. It's going to be like the original. It's going to be 279-mile range, and it's not LFP, so you can't charge it to 100%, but maybe it allows for a bit better voltage architecture, so the range is lower but it charges faster, so it kind of equals out ultimately, which I do think kind of is a good compromise. That's part of the reason I think the Cybertruck would still sell incredibly well, even if the range was under 400, because if it charges really fast, then that ultimately benefits your trip time the most. Worst case scenario, what I'm not excited for is just more promises of robotaxis and bots, which are gonna be missed, or deadlines are gonna be pushed over and over again, and then it was just a big waste of time. Are Tesla superchargers available to other cars yet? In Europe, yes, not in the US. Let's see. Body style doesn't change. What are you guys talking about? Battery size. Depends on how aerodynamic you make it, but yeah, will be a pretty penny for a 500-mile range unless the government helps out like they are with GM. Yeah, I don't think GM is selling vehicles at a profit, personally. I think they're just kind of selling EVs to make them look good. But yeah, the amount of money it must take to get those battery packs at the size they are. We know what the average cost of batteries are. I don't see a way for them to make those things profitably. Let's see. California, Arizona area have no issues with superchargers, so yeah, 250 miles is okay. I mean, it depends on the use case. I'm not trying to say that everybody on Earth can live with 250. I'm just saying that if the average daily commute is 40 miles, then you have your occasional road trip. Assuming you have a solid charging network, standard range is fine. You're still going to be stopping every couple hours for 10 to 15 minutes. If you get a long range, you stop every a little bit longer. You can go like an extra 30 minutes between drives, but doesn't save you all that much time. It's a bit like, okay, if it's 4 cycles on the battery pack on a 250-mile range Tesla, that's 1,000 miles. How often are you driving 1,000 miles in your car? I know it happens. I've done it too. But to act like it's the norm and that's the regular thing that everybody does all the time is probably not realistic. If it's a 350-mile range, then you can do 1,000 miles within, roughly 3 cycles. So I'm not saying that you stop 3 times. It's you stop until you can charge and reach your next destination. But like, I don't, yeah. 40% year-over-year growth. The rest of the industry is down. Stock tanks. I knew the stock would tank. I hate to say I told you so. Oh, sorry. Taker super chatted. Have you estimated highway range on your car 75 miles per hour? Well, it's pretty easy. You just go to the energy graph. Look at this graph. It gives you a projected range. And yeah, I've driven at 75 miles per hour before at a pretty high state of charge. It's obviously like all EVs, you get worse efficiency at higher speed. But when I'm at charge to full and then I go 75, it's probably at 250, 260 kilowatt hours, which means the range is probably like 220, 230. But you're making better time, so doesn't make as big a difference as you may think. I want them to deliver products, not delay everything by years and abandon projects features at its convenience. Yeah, I'm with you there, H2O. I would love for them to deliver a cheaper Model Y. That would be the best case scenario for me. So you want Tesla to be confined by their statements? If they develop a better way, they shouldn't pursue it because they said something different than before? No, I'm saying pursue the better thing as you find it, but that means stop making promises you can't keep, coach. I'm not saying that they shouldn't change to things just so they can stick to their word. I'm saying don't make a bunch of words if you're going to change your mind in a couple months anyway. That was my whole point from the beginning, is like, do we need an investor day? Tesla's going to be changing plans, changing directions constantly. So if that's the case, what's the point in having these big presentations where they say, here is our long-term plan, if next month that's no longer the plan? Like, it changes too much for there to be presentations on it. And I think Tesla has spoken their core fundamentals enough that investors that are that interested, I think, have the information they need. Basically, I don't think there's a bunch of information that Tesla has that would change people's opinion on the stock or the company. They've told us like they want to scale up production of EVs, lower the cost of batteries, lower the cost of manufacturing, make vehicles more affordable so more people can buy them. And their hope that they've been shooting for years is that if they find a way to make cars drive themselves, then they would be cheaper to rent out as a robotaxi service than they would be to own. And that way you can have a robotaxi replace 5 gas cars instead of 1 EV that replaces 1 gas car. I get it. All right. Either you believe that they can do that or you don't. And these presentations tend to not change many people's minds. The bulls are amazed by it and go, wow, of course they can do that. And the bears are like, yeah, no, I don't believe it because you said you would do this before and you didn't do it. So it's like, is this convincing anybody? Like, it's not, none of these presentations have swayed anyone's opinion on the company, in my opinion. Especially after they announce it and then they change their mind and then they miss the timeline that they gave. So I'm like, just don't announce things. Don't claim things that you're not, don't make promises you can't keep is what I'm trying to say. I drive 3,000 miles every 6 weeks. Wow, that's impressive. Population density of Tesla owners across North America. Curious to see what that would look like. I bet it would be pretty similar to just population density. The areas with a lot of people have a lot of Teslas. The people with not very many people don't have many Teslas. Let's see. I wish companies invested more in solar roofs, hood, trunk for their cars, but probably cost is still too much. It's not the cost really as much. It's more just the efficiency. Unless you're a vehicle like the Aptera, solar on a vehicle has very little advantages. Like, if like my car is incredibly efficient, but it's still less than twice. Less than twice. It's more than twice as inefficient as the Aptera is. So if you somehow, which I don't think you can, but if you coated my Model 3 with the exact number of solar cells that are on the Aptera, which I don't think the trunk and stuff would allow for, instead of it being 40 miles of range, it would be like 15. And a lot of that would probably be consumed by Sentry mode in the HVAC anyway. So it would probably result in 5. But it would make the car look a lot weirder. It would definitely drive up the cost a little bit. And it would, more so than the cost of parts, it would complicate the assembly line. And you wouldn't have the glass roof anymore. It would just be a body roof, I guess, which would make visibility harder. So, yeah, you'd replace the rear view mirror with a screen, I guess. It's just, with a vehicle like the Aptera, there's a lot of advantages to covering it in solar. But with most EVs, and again, my EV is incredibly efficient. Most other EVs are worse efficient than this one. The solar would basically break even, which I'm not against. I wouldn't complain if they did start incorporating more solar onto vehicles, but I understand why they don't do it. I agree. I wish they'd invest more, though. Sono is able to do 20 plus miles with solar. Yeah, but again, they've got bigger problems with funding. I wanted a Chevy Bolt, but the charging is ridiculous, especially since I live in an apartment. Good car, but bad charging. Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think that if you can charge from home and you don't do a lot of road tripping, the Chevy Bolt is a great buy. I mean, considering how much cheaper the Bolt is than a Tesla, it's like, okay, if you save $20,000 on the vehicle, how many plane tickets can you buy with $20,000? Instead of road tripping, just fly, you know? It's not a bad alternative. If the Chevy Bolt doesn't have to road trip, it's a fantastic value from what I can tell. Tesla will solve FSD, but when is the issue? I predict 2025. No one knows. And that's why I don't want anyone to claim that they know. Whether it's Tesla, whether it's us, whether it's investors, whether it's Elon, no one knows. We could all be wrong, or some of us could be right, but we're not going to know until we get there. And I don't think that making timeline predictions and delaying them year after year after year is getting anywhere. It's just making the people that doubt you even more. Don't make a girl a promise you know you can't keep. Yeah, and the investors are the girl. Could anyone have predicted Uber 20 years ago? No. That's my point. So stop trying to predict Uber. That's what Tesla's doing. They're constantly trying to predict when they're going to crack the robotaxi code, and they keep getting it wrong. And I think that makes it look bad. It would not look as bad if you just said that we're going to try our best to make it work, but we'll get there when we get there, you know? Yes, 20 years ago, there was private car service. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of things you can't predict about the future, so that's why I'm just saying don't. Like, it's okay to speculate. I love speculation too. You know, I run a YouTube channel, so that's one thing to be like, maybe they'll do this, maybe they'll do this. But it's one thing when you're like, invest in my company, you know, buy my stock because I will deliver on this timeline, and then you don't. That's when it gets fishy. That's when it gets weird. um, let's see. The graph is not the best way to calculate if you haven't driven at that speed a significant distance. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing. Can I show you? That's the great thing about the energy graph is you can set it. Let me see what you guys are seeing. I'm at 66% right now, and it can be average over the last 30 miles. So if you go on the highway and you drive at 75 miles per hour and you switch it to 5 miles like this, that's going to take you like 3 minutes to go 5 miles at 75 miles per hour. I don't know. I'm a dropout. And then this will tell you what your projected range is based on your past 5 miles of driving. So it's really not a very hard thing to calculate, but there's other variables involved. Like most people that are driving 75 miles per hour, it depends on the wind speed, it depends on the air temperature, it depends on the rain, it depends on how many people are in the car, how you're running the HVAC system, it depends on the elevation gain, the decline, your regen setting. Like, there's so many variables that go into it. I can't give you like a exact, the car will go this far at 75. And honestly, it's not that important because when you're road tripping, you're not going to 100. The car calculates based on projected range. You need to charge to this percentage, and then you can reach it to your next charge station. So I think people are getting hung up on the max range number when I used to be too, to be fair. Before I bought an EV, I used to think like, I want to wait until they get to 300 plus on the cheap model, or I want to wait till they can get to 400 miles of range. I'll wait for the right one. And then when I started road tripping with it, I'm like, wow, that was really kind of a pointless metric. It doesn't really matter all that much, the max range number. Let's see. The trolls hate us. Tesla likes to set a time goal, I guess. Yes, and I think it's hurting them more than it's helping them. If you set time goals and you miss them 6 times in a row, I think they kind of lose their effect, and that's what we're at now. Educating the public is important, and your answer does exactly that. Well, thank you, Upward Thunder. I appreciate that. Uber is just an app. FSD is a bit more of a challenge, and there's federal regulation. Oh yeah, I don't think anyone was claiming that Uber is the same thing as FSD. I just think that the edge cases and the complexities of FSD are a lot more than Tesla thinks. I think most of the bulls I talk to are like, once you figure out that code, like they're just going to send out one software update and suddenly all these cars are just going to start printing money. I'm like, okay, who's maintaining them? Who's charging them? What do you do about vandalism? What do you do about liability if someone intervenes while the car's in motion? What do you do about regulatory approval? Some cities allow it, some don't. And sometimes they call pile-ups, and if there's a software bug and all the robo-taxis are piled up, similar to the Cruise robo-taxis are being tested in San Francisco, and they had this big pile-up, and there's a lot of scrutiny against Tesla and people that go after them. So if there's a bunch of people protesting them, you can stop robo-taxis in their tracks very, very easily. If you don't want robo-taxis on the road, it is incredibly easy to stop them. You literally just stand in front of them. You can slap some flex tape on the cameras and now it can't move anymore. And there's a lot of people that don't like Tesla. Think of all the people that are like, keying Teslas just because they don't like it. So I don't think that it's just going to be this one update that's like, okay, we figured it out. Now we can put robotaxis everywhere. It's like, it's probably going to be one of those things where like way later, years after they thought it was going to be available, they introduce it in like Fremont, and there's like 5 to 10 that are only available to internal employees. And then the rollout of the robotaxi network basically goes as slow as FSD beta rollout went. This takes like probably even slower. It takes like several years to iron out the kinks. Very few people can actually test it. It only works at night in good weather. And they say over time, we'll eventually roll it out to, in the daytime and public use. And it'll just, that's my prediction, is that it's this thought that it's going to Waymo pile up. It wasn't Waymo, it was Cruise, but there's a software bug basically where all the cars were stopped around each other and they thought there was a pileup when in reality the software in the cars was just confused. And if that happens, then and causes traffic jams, then people are going to protest and ask that city governments don't allow robo-taxis in their areas, similar to how Tesla deals with a lot of scrutiny on what they can and can't allow with autopilot, and they have to, what you can refer to it as a name, and the EU is already limiting how FSD beta can perform on their streets, and that's why they basically haven't provided FSD beta in that countries, because they have very strict regulation on how much the car can do autonomously. So that's my problem, is people are oversimplifying how big of a problem it is. I don't think it's just a software problem, but I do think the software problem is enormous. And anytime I go through a construction zone, basically I give up hope. Every time, when like the guys with the road signs are telling me to run the red light, how the heck would you get a robotaxi to understand that situation? So the outcome is probably going to be the robotaxi avoids any construction zone. So if anything's under construction, it just says I can't go there, and then it gets you to the nearest possible area, and it's like, I guess you got to walk from here or something, It'll be like, no, I don't even go there. No, thank you. Youngman says robotaxi coming soon, 2030. You know what's funny? 2030 is 7 years away. Less than 7 now, technically. We're January 3rd. Let's see. Took my Model Y on a road trip from North Dakota to Denver in the 20 degrees Fahrenheit weather and found the projection very accurate. First road trip, and by the end of the way home, I was fine, arriving at 3%. Exactly. Oof, Dad. Especially if you've watched a lot of videos of people driving their Teslas all the way to nothing, and you realize how far they go once they hit 0, it makes you very comfortable with like, we'll get there with 3%. That's plenty. No big deal. Once you're comfortable with the charging reliability, you'll get very, very low states of charge of the battery pack. Like, I've never had range anxiety. I've had trip time anxiety where I wasn't sure, when I was driving to Randy's baby shower in San Diego, I was worried that we were going to be really, really late because of all the traffic in LA. And during that traffic in LA, I had to pull off and charge somewhere. But I wasn't worried that I was going to get like stranded and like, oh no, I need to call a tow truck. That's never happened. Drop off and pickups will be challenged. What are you talking about? Pickup, like delivery services? I don't know how you can pick them up with the robotaxi. What, with the bot? I don't know. But that's great, Oof Dad. Marketing range is misleading when they recommend you to keep 80% charge. I mean, I think people misuse the term range. I mean, gas cars typically don't get their range targets either, but there's so many gas stations that you just don't think about it. Most people don't. You notice any gas car commercial from the past 20 years has not mentioned what the range is. They tell you the economy, they tell you the efficiency, which you usually don't get, but they don't talk about range much because the infrastructure is built so you don't have to worry about range. And I think that's where Teslas are, basically. Non-Tesla different story because their charging network sucks. Yes, I watch Marquez's autofocus channel. Love Marquez. Jacob says, I finished a road trip with 0%, also forced a few miles on 0. Not going to lie, it was very stressful. Well, I've never gotten to 0, but usually what happens when I'm supercharging is, the car tells you as you're charging up, here's what you'll arrive at your next stop with. And as the battery charge, it starts when you plug in, it says you'll arrive at -20. So basically you can't make it. And then as the supercharging goes on, it's like, now you'll arrive at -5. Now you'll arrive at 0. Now you'll arrive at 5%. And normally that projection for my driving is always way too generous. It thinks I'm going to use a lot more energy than I actually do, which I guess is smart, right? The code should probably prepare you for that. And in the car, it says you're going to get there at 5%, and then I actually get there at like 12%. So basically, when the projection says that I'm going to get there at 2%, I'm probably going to get there at 7. Just depends on how you drive, I guess. I did a whole video, Roman, on my cost of owning the Model 3. My Tesla insurance is $81 something a month. Let me pull up the notes here. It's probably going to go up, though, because we drove past what our projected mileage was. We drove a lot more than we were expecting. Oh, it's not there. Oh, that's the electricity cost. Where did I put it? I thought I had a folder. Oh, Sonata versus Tesla. Here we go. Yeah, my Model 3 cost $81.22 a month to insure, which is much more than my old gas car, but that makes sense. Um, let's see. The consumption is the key. If you drive at the rated consumption level, you would get the exact range. That's correct. And if you drive below, which I actually have in some situations, you'll actually get better than estimated range. Um, but as inaccurate as the EPA range numbers are, they're more accurate than pretty much any other range test on the planet. You know, all the range calculators that the Asian markets use versus the European markets, they're all way more generous. They all claim you get way more range than you actually do. So the EPA is not the end-all be-all, but it is the best range calculator we have at this point. Justin says, just got a Bolt last month and I'm happy with the value. Don't go on that many road trips, but definitely wish I had enough to buy a Tesla. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm still tempted to I was very tempted to see what I could get a Bolt for before I got a Tesla, but ultimately I do a lot of road trips, and we're planning several right now actually. Um, let's see. The Tesla software always tells me I'm using more energy than forecast because of my driving. Even when I drive exactly the speed limit on autopilot, it seems like a problem with the forecast. That's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into energy consumption. It can be based on temperature, it can be based on elevation, it could depend on what kind of tires you have. That's why I wanted the 18-inch aero wheels for the better efficiency. Do you take off the rims? Did you opt for the sport tires? Did you want bigger tires because they look prettier? That will affect your range. Do you have a roof rack on the car? That'll affect range. That affects your aerodynamic. Youngman says, my hybrid states range of 500 miles. My actual is like 440. Yeah, that's normal. I don't think... You also, the picture of the burger on the McDonald's ad doesn't actually look like that. You know what kills me about advertising with food? They always show, always, without question, these fast food commercials or billboards, they always show this pristine cheeseburger and the soda is in a glass. They don't have glasses. Why are they showing this like glass with ice in it, like you're drinking this premium milk? Like, you don't have glasses. You're going to serve that to me in a wax paper cup that feels cheap, and if you leave the drink in there overnight, then it's going to be all melting the bottom part of the cope. I hate that kind of false advertising. Like, people just know that there's a certain amount of theatrics and you know, pretty styling that goes on with advertising, and it's that range is that it is the range, like what can you get, best case scenario basically. And some range calculators like in Asia and the European Union are way more generous. They'll like basically hypermile vehicles and be like, oh yeah, the Model 3 gets over 450 miles of range if you drive it at 20 miles an hour. But no one does that. The EPA at least is a pretty good mix of highway driving and city driving. So if you did just highway driving, it would be lower, but if you did just city driving, it would be higher. So it's basically the closest number you can get. That guy says thoughts about the stock price. I think it's correcting. I'm not like worried about it or super concerned by it. Like, it makes sense that as we're entering a economic climate that's less certain, all stock, like, I don't just look at Tesla stock. I have a bunch of stocks that I have in my stock app that I watch, you know, not frequently, but occasionally. And usually I notice that all the EV stocks seem to move together. Like Tesla, Lucid, Rivian, even Ford and GM and VW, they'll all kind of move together. And there's, whether or not you view Tesla as a car company or not, there's a lot of people that invest in them as they are a car company, and then when there's bad news around Tesla or around whoever, they pull out of all the car brands at the same time. My sister's waving at me. But yeah, it's going down, which makes it a better buy, basically, I would say. I mean, I'm still convinced that this is not the new normal for Tesla stock. I think this is another classic example of buying the fear. There's a lot of fear going on in stocks right now, and particularly around Tesla. But honestly, most of the fear surrounding them doesn't really affect the core fundamentals of the company. So I'm not selling. Let's see. I will say the miles range at the top of the display is misleading. You have to go by the energy trip graph, leave the title, header, icon, and percent, and use the graph nav. Yeah, I've always done that. I don't know why anybody preferred having the range on the battery icon at the top, because that's so dependent on information you don't have yet. You don't know how you're driving. You don't know what traffic's going to be like. You don't know what temperatures are going to be. So that's what battery percentage is like that on our phones and laptops too. Does anyone have their phone battery listed in minutes or hours? No. And you know why? Because they don't know how you're going to use your phone. What should we use your previous smartphone activity and base that on how much hours of battery life you have left? No. The percentage is, yeah, that's a better way to calculate it. And then if you want to know how many miles you have left, sure, use the energy app. But honestly, either you're driving a short enough distance that you don't need to worry about if you're going to run out of charge, or you're road tripping, in which case, if you're road tripping, the car is calculating all that stuff anyway. It's going to tell you how what your battery will be at when you arrive at the charge location. So I like looking at the energy graph primarily because I just think it's interesting. Especially when I'm driving in a place I've driven before, like I know where I am, I don't need navigation. It's kind of interesting how people prefer different things. Like my wife likes seeing maps. Like she just likes the GPS navigation with the little red arrow. She just likes to see where we are. But I'm like, I know where I am. A lot of the time we're driving places I've driven a million times before. I don't need navigation. I live in a pretty rural area, so I'm not worried about traffic or anything like that. We don't get traffic where I live. So I prefer, like, why would I want the map up? I don't need to see anything on the map. I know where I am. So I prefer having the energy graph up at all times. But when she gets in, she's always like, oh, let me dismiss that. I'm like, honey, wah! I want to see if I can get close to the efficiency of an Aptera. Come on. In that exact tone in level of volume. On the auto bin, I can go 600 miles easily. That's not because of tank stops. It's because of range. Yeah, that's cool if you do it. I just don't think that's most people. I love the new energy app. So useful to see what's using more energy than it should. Yeah, I thought I would like it. I mean, I like the UI of it. It looks cool, and it definitely gives you a lot more detail, but I unfortunately can't say it's been very helpful for me. Like, I've used it on long drives, and it's always like, yep, you used what I thought. I guess I'm just a pretty efficient driver, and we tend to leave the HVAC on auto, and battery conditioning doesn't use that much. Like, it's always just like, everything's fine. You're driving normally. And then occasionally it's like, you could have saved 0.5% energy if you drove at 65 miles per hour instead of 75. I'm like, I was going 75 in the slow lane and everyone was passing me. I'm sorry, I'm not going 65. At least where I live, people are driving way over the speed limit regularly, to the point that it's basically dangerous to go the speed limit. Even the cops and the highway patrol are going way faster than I literally passed not too long ago, just a couple days ago, I think. I was on the freeway in a 65 zone going 75, and I passed the highway patrolman that's parked on the road with the radar gun, and didn't do anything. And you know why? Because there were people going 80 right next to me. I was not the fastest car on the road. Gemini wheels, totally stock. It also says I'm using more energy because of elevation, like you have a choice of elevation on a certain route. No, I don't think it's trying to say you have a choice. It's just saying that's using more energy. There's just physics involved with that. It's telling you why the range is not as good as you'd like. Yeah, Jacob says, Apple has also lost $1 trillion as Tesla was dropping. Economic climate is a major factor. I agree. And that's something that people weren't considering when they kept thinking, like, I remember a couple of years ago, everyone was freaking out about how Tesla's going to be in the S&P 500. Tesla's going to be included. This means all these major index funds have to buy Tesla. And it's like, okay, yes, they do. And that should boost the stock in theory. But in reality, that means that when you have big professional index funds like that, depending on which stocks perform certain ways, then it doesn't matter if they believe in the company or not. Like, the stock price will dictate whether or not they sell. So if the stock dips below a certain point, a lot of those funds are under contract. They're like, well, that's lost too much value. We're no longer buying any more, or we're pulling out of what we have because we can't afford to let too much of our fund dip in value. So you lose a lot of the reasonable investment, in my opinion, at that point, because now there's a bunch of people that I definitely see on Twitter and in YouTube comments all the time that, like, they don't even really pay attention to the company. All they do is talk about the stock and how they want the stock to go up, and Tesla needs to find a way to make the stock go up. And it's like, I just deliver great products and services and the stock can worry about itself. Short term, it's going to do crazy things, but yeah, I'm not worried. I know that it's a volatile stock. I knew that when I bought it. And that means that it will do crazy things like this. But in my opinion, seeing a lot of fear surrounding a company that has an absolutely secure future, I mean, nothing's impossible, I guess. Tesla could go under, but I just find it incredibly unlikely given the talent of the board, the engineering team, and the fact that the future is electric. More and more people want EVs, and Tesla builds, in my opinion, the best EVs with great efficiency. But more important than the range or the design or the efficiency is the charging network. I truthfully believe that is Tesla's greatest advantage that they will always have on everybody else. And as long as they're building superchargers and they can build them for way cheaper, and every time I see someone complaining on Twitter about Electrify America, it just solidifies my belief that Tesla will be the most valuable company in the world at some point, probably by 2030. But I don't know for sure. You know, it's not investment advice. Skylar says, totally agree. Who believes the range estimator on any gas car anyhow? I always look at the gas level, which is kind of like a percentage of how the full tank is. That's true. Everyone I know doesn't look at the range calculator. We have one in our car, and it's not very accurate either. Are the robotaxis not ready yet? I don't think. Where are they? I don't think they're ready, personally. I think that Investor Day will be talking about how someday robotaxis will be ready, and when they are, they will instantly make us billions and billions of dollars because we can just send out a software update, and suddenly each one will start making us several dollars a mile, and poof, free money, yay! You know, like, it's the mindset surrounding them, I think, is way too simple, and I think that's going to backfire. And I think that's part of the reason the stock is heavily down. You know, I think it's okay for the market to realize that, hey, if you were buying Tesla stock expecting the company to rake in a bunch of robotaxi revenue, that's why the timelines are important, you know. When Elon says that they want to have, there's already been some class action lawsuits, there probably will be more. But when Elon said that there would be 1 million robotaxis in 2020, they detailed, thank you for the super chat, I'll answer that. They detailed at that event how much money they could make per year off of robotaxis. And they were like, per taxi we could make, I forget what it was, like $10,000 or $20,000 a year of pure profit for Tesla. And if Tesla makes claims like that, like this means we're going to have 1 million vehicles making us $10,000 a year in the next 2 years, people will buy the stock accordingly if they believe Elon, if they believe Tesla. And if they continuously miss deadlines and say, oh no, end of next year, end of next year, end of next year, then that impacts what people's value of the company is. Even if you don't care about the Elon Twitter thing of like, oh, I don't like what he said on Twitter. Okay, great. You found someone you don't agree with on Twitter. Amazing. That's impressive. You know, like, who cares? Like, I'm not interested in everyone's political leanings. Like, that's not what I invest in companies based on. Like, I don't need to hear about it. And honestly, I deleted Twitter off my phone because I felt like both Twitter and Discord and Reddit and, you know, all the social media apps on my phone, they were just like, they weren't making me happy. It was just kind of sucking me in, and I was getting very addicted. And I still need those social media sites for my job, for work and content production. So I still use them off of my laptop or occasionally my iPad, but for the most part, the device that is with me doesn't stay connected to those things. And I found myself feel a lot happier the less time I spend on social media. But I do understand, even if you don't care about political opinions or what Elon said or what Elon, when he sold stock or what have you, if you don't see the revenue coming in the way you were told earlier, you're going to sell stock and look at the company differently, because now you're like, all right, well, if it lost this much of its value, then it has to 20x now in order to get to where I thought it was going to be by this certain year. Whereas before I thought it was just going to 10x, and I was counting on it 10xing. Now I'm counting on it 20, 30xing. And the future can't be predicted, so people don't know for sure. But when the price goes down like that, it definitely causes a domino effect. But that's the thing. I didn't buy Tesla stock anticipating that it was going to 1000x or something. Like I wasn't buying it like there was no tomorrow and I needed to like take out equity in my house or any last dollar I can find I need to put into Tesla stock. I was like, I think it will go up. I feel confident about that. I don't know how much over the long haul, not in the short term, but I don't know. It could 5x, it could 10x, it could 20x. I don't know. So, but I'm not going to act like I know for sure it will definitely hit this amount by this year, because Tesla's missed timelines and they've hit local maximums, and it has not taken off the way they thought it would, or progress didn't go as quickly as they had hoped, and that impacts today's revenue. So the price per earnings ratio is basically changing a lot. And when it gets down to these prices, I think that's when a lot of the more long-term investors are like, hey, it's on sale. Great. So they look at it as a buying opportunity because they see the core fundamentals of the company, which I think there's the biggest payoff for people that are long-term investors. That short-term is just gambling, basically. Thank you for the super chat, Taker. He says, if Nax was accepted, would the stock skyrocket? No. You know, that's the funny thing I've noticed as being a shareholder for many years now. I noticed that rarely does anything Tesla announces, or very rarely does any like event trigger a stock skyrocket. The biggest one I can remember, what's funny is like anytime Tesla announces something, usually the stock goes down. Here's our delivery numbers. Here's the Cybertruck. Here's battery day. It always just doesn't live up to the hype, doesn't live up to the expectations. And then everyone panics because day trading is basically emotional trading. You're basing it off of how you feel that day, how the headlines are looking. Oh, I read a bad headline, better sell now. So no, what I notice is that the most amount of growth happens when just nothing gets announced. Actually, the biggest skyrocket I've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. I've been watching Tesla stock remotely closely for the past few years. The biggest skyrocket I've seen was the Hertz deal, which was hilarious because that didn't really mean anything. Like all that happened was Hertz announced that they were going to be buying like 100,000 Model 3s or something. They said, we're going to buy a bunch of Teslas for our rental car service. And that day, the stock went up like 15% or something crazy. I was like, what is that? All that proves is that there's demand for the car. And when Hertz announced that, there was like a 6-month wait time for the cars. Why did that convince a bunch of people to buy the stock? I don't know. But that's the biggest thing I could think of. And at this point, I don't think another company announcing that they are going to use an open charge standard that Tesla created would change that much of the opinion. I don't know. The stock is very illogical in my opinion, at least on the daily basis. Like, if you're talking about skyrocket, like maybe if we're talking Tesla stock will skyrocket over the course of 20 years, but that's not really skyrocket, you know. That's more like a eagle slowly getting elevation. That's more like it's more like the elevation gain of a snail. It's the long game, you know. I don't believe in get rich quick schemes. I think that like it's just a patience game. But yeah, I don't think that would make the stock skyrocket. Have they delivered all those cars to Hertz already? I don't know, actually. Maybe, but I think Hertz has ordered more. They said they were going to get Model Ys too. S&P 500 inclusion was bigger, I think. I don't remember it being that big. I remember everyone talking about how it would be a big deal. And then when it finally happened, it was like, you know, I don't remember it taking off like crazy. I use Vanguard. Yes, I have seen that FSD Beta has officially gone to wide release. Yes, and I've seen that people have gotten it within 5 minutes of subscribing. That's great. It took way too long, but I've reached a point where I don't feel like it's going to be worth it to me. Like, for one, I'm usually driving with my wife in the car, and I know based on how Navigate on Autopilot performed, and I believe we took my wife in Mike's car, which had FSD Beta in the past. There's a lot of wives that don't like FSD beta. You don't have to look very hard on YouTube to find is FSD beta wife approved videos, and a lot of the time they don't like it, and I don't blame them. But it's not something that I think I would use very casually unless I was alone in the car, which again I'm normally not. And I debated about making videos on it and ultimately realized like the amount of money I would spend I wouldn't get back out of the video. So as cool as it is, and I want to try it and I would love to check it out, I just don't feel comfortable dropping $200 on it in its current state. Like there's when everybody has it, it's not as special, I guess. It's just a lot of money that I would rather put towards, other things. So if there's a new update that comes out that looks really promising and really game-changing, then maybe I'll try it. But so far, I've been watching the FSD beta videos, and it's always been the same kind of pretty good, but still needs some work. And I can do a video, too, where I say, yep, it's pretty good, but it still needs some work. But I don't know if that's going to... I don't know. Those videos are hilarious, though. Yes, they are funny. I just think it would mostly be me flushing down not only my money, but my time. It would be fun, but we'll do it eventually. I'm not saying I'm never going to subscribe to FSD. I just don't feel like it right now. It's like, I would rather it get better. Or at least assume less, have me assume less liability. Like if I didn't have to keep my hand on the wheel, that would be a pretty awesome feature. I have many good drives with no disengagements or interventions. I always read about that. And then I try it, and then it's like, what the heck was the car thinking? It's amazing. I think this is another big problem with the software of FSD, is you can make it perform really well in a certain region, but that same version will perform terribly in another region. And I think Tesla might start to discover that over time, that the way you calibrate this algorithm, because the way I've understood it, based on interviews with Andre and Elon and what they've talked about with development, is that it's not like you try out FSD beta and it makes a turn and the turn was a little harsh, or it kind of turned too aggressively or almost ran into the side barrier. And then they go into the code and say, don't do that. Don't hit the side barrier. Don't turn as aggressively. Like, it's not that basic. It is like this really sophisticated algorithm that you have to fine tune. So when you tune one part of it, that improves one region, but can make another region worse. I've literally seen versions where like Omar will post a video and say like, yes, it performed really well for me and it's been extremely smooth, no interventions. And then on that same version, Chris from Dirty Tesla will say like, oh my God, what did they do? This is so much worse than the last version. And like, depending on where you are, it fluctuates in performance. And I think that's going to make it more challenging and more tricky to roll out at scale. I bet you'll get V11 though. I would like to try it when V11 finally comes out, but Elon himself, who likes to hype up things, Elon is saying that V11 is not that big a deal. Let's see. If Drew wants to do an FSD beta video, my Y is always available for such needs. Thank you, Mike, and I do appreciate that. It would technically be cheaper for me to drive to Mike's house and film a beta video and drive back, but it would take a lot more time, which unfortunately I have... My time is very divided right now between lots of different things, between work and between home life and family stuff going on that I just have chosen to keep private. There's a lot of things going on, and I don't have like infinite time to just... Basically, I know that the FSD beta videos are going to take longer to edit than my normal videos because I have to like set up the camera and go somewhere that's not too close to my house and film how the car is performing and then compile those clips into a little video. And then all of that will probably make less money than the $200. I'm not afraid to be honest with you guys about that. Like, my videos don't make an insane amount, but that's okay. If going to hit something, don't. Yes, that's the essentially full self-driving beta code, Skylar, correct. I think it would wear off very quickly, at least in my experience with FSD beta. When me and Mike tried it, it was really fun for like 10 minutes, and then after a while it was like, oh my God, why are you doing that? And then it hits the potholes, and you realize how amazing driving a car, how complicated it really is, even for a human. Like, there's very basic things you do, just like giving a little bit of space here, and like not accelerating here, and not, banking too hard. Like, there's all these little things that you don't think about when you're driving. And then when the car is driving, you suddenly realize how many things it's like when I rode in the FSD beta vehicle, I was like, I didn't realize there was so many legal ways to drive uncomfortably. There's a bunch of things it does that's not breaking the law, but still makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I think I'm not going to use it casually until it's comfortable. And Chris has even made some good points in his videos that I don't even think we can achieve as comfortable as a regular person driving, because when you're the one driving, you just know what to expect with weight and acceleration and how fast you go through a turn, because you're in control. There's just an inherent extra level of comfort when you are the one doing all of the little motions. And when a inanimate, object that you can't look at in the eye, or you can't talk to, or you can't ask questions, is just driving you, and it does weird things, there's just an inherent level of discomfort that comes with that, and will probably always be there. Even if robotaxis get safer than a human, you'll still probably find those moments where you're like, what is it doing? What is it doing? Most confidently uncertain driver on the road. Exactly. I think, and I also somewhat agree with Kyle from Out of Spec when he tested FSD beta. His drives were horrible, my God. But that's another example, right? He's not in California. One person tests it, it works great. Another person tests it, it's horrible, like hitting speed bumps and blinkers are going wrong ways. He brought up a good point that, like, a lot of people consider it a success if the car doesn't crash on a drive. If I didn't have to intervene and the car was able to drive itself from point A to point B, then it was a successful drive. But he was bringing up how if you're confusing or annoying other drivers, he wouldn't necessarily count that as a success or something that you would want lots of vehicles being driven by. Like turning on the left blinker and trying to get into the right lane, or not getting over when you're supposed to. And there's a lot of like polite driving habits that we've baked into our driving routine that we don't think about, that does have to be considered when you're actually driving the car. There's a big increase in the stock price leading up to the first stock split. That's true. I remember that. And I think that's why a lot of people wanted to split the stock again, is because the first time they split the stock, everyone thought that was a huge deal. Like, oh my God, if they split the stock, so many more people can buy it. And there was more growth leading up to the stock split than there was post-stock split. Sorry, I said Spock. Let's see. The way people use FSD is the biggest problem. The car should be corrected immediately. That will create data to help the development. Waiting to see what the car will do is not helpful. I've heard both, actually. I've heard it go either way. Like, yes, it does. The software engineers can see all of that data. They can see where you take over, and they can see where you make a correction. But at the same time, if you don't let the car go, there's a lot of problems that it may run into along the way when it is driving itself that you wouldn't run into if you keep intervening. If any time the Tesla does something that you're not comfortable with and you correct it, then there's unknown issues that you're not going to be able to fix because the driver never lets it discover those issues. But yeah, I don't disagree with that point. There's probably, I think, a lot of robotaxi edge cases that need to be ironed out that can't be ironed out because the driver's always there. Like, what do you do in this situation if the driver gives you no input? And I still think there's a lot of situations where people are pushing on the accelerator or fixing its position on the road. And a huge part of the equation is still not being addressed, in my opinion, which is like navigating out of the parking lot or finding a parking space and parking. My guess is that Tesla's not focusing on that because their logic is, well, the robotaxi won't park. It'll just drop you off and then go somewhere else. But I'm like, auto park is still pretty clunky in my experience. And you're going to need to find a way to park those things to charge. You're going to be at busy airports where there's people running across the road and cars stopping and going. And you're going to need to find a way to find an empty space and get in there and have not, cause curb rash against your tires and let the people get in the car and stuff. Yeah, like Mike said, car didn't crash during trip has similar vibes as Starship didn't explode during aerogymnastics. Yes, that's exactly right. The rocket didn't explode. Like if you were telling astronauts that were going to ride in the rocket that, well, it was a successful mission because the rocket didn't explode, that would be like, well, I mean, sure. If you had to choose between crashing and not crashing would be good. But if you're confusing drivers around you or taking longer routes than you should be because you didn't make the turn in time, um, it's kind of hard to consider that a success. Oh yeah, remember when Tesla said reverse summon was coming soon? Yeah, when was that? It was like a year ago, over a year ago. Um, Skylar says the lane keep in my Camry is okay, but when I was passing a semi on the highway with that feature engaged, I noticed that I like to hug the left line when I do that. I know, right? I didn't realize how much lane hugging I did until I got autopilot. Once I turned on autopilot, I was like, ooh, ooh, don't be so close. Oh my God. Like, but the car's just like, in between the lines, stay there. And I'm like, ah. This semi-truck driver's on his phone and he's going like, oh, sorry. So that's when I kind of want to hug to the other side of the freeway. There's little details like that. I think another big problem that I've noticed with autopilot, I don't know if this is fixed. I know it's not fixed with Navigate on autopilot because I tried it with that, but I don't know if this is going to be fixed with V11 or FSD beta. But when you're in the right lane, as you're supposed to be, unless you're passing, and more cars are coming on the ramp, they're going to join you. I feel like the car probably doesn't have great visual on it, but I'm able to see from pretty far away, okay, there's a big line of cars coming or a big semi truck coming, and they're speeding up, and we're gonna merge and get right up close next to each other. The self-driving tech is not good at realizing how to make space for them. And you don't realize how incredibly rude it is if there's a on-ramp that people are meeting up with you on and then your lanes merge. If you just lock speed with them and you're just like, get out of my way, it's like incredibly stressful for them and the cars behind them that are all trying to catch up. And it's like, I think the code needs to get a lot better at realizing like, oh, someone's coming, let me slow down, even though they're not in front of me. Because right now, with the current state of Navigate on autopilot, it won't slow down unless there's something directly in front of it. If there's just a car coming up to the side, it'll just keep that exact same speed. Even if the car's merging in front of you and you're going to be really, really close to it, it won't slow down until it's directly in front of you. And I have not seen any videos of it doing that any better, unfortunately. Auto park is the least of their worries. Yeah, they need to just figure out park assist first. They can't even get that on the non-ultrasonic vehicles. Game Master says, I do agree with you when it comes to correcting the car on autopilot. My car's in autopilot used to not handle a certain interaction well, but now over time it does handle it well. That's good. I've heard that well. I've heard that as from Mike as well. Jay says that will be improved when single stack and the pseudo USS control comes out. Right, there's always some other hype. Well, that'll be fixed when we figure out Dojo. Oh, that'll be fixed in version 12. Oh, that'll be fixed in version 30. There's always something around the corner. I know they've said it'll be fixed then, but I don't know if it will be. Forget their phones. I've seen semi-drivers clipping their tone. Oh, God. I don't need to hear that, Skylar, please. Jacob says, FSD will move over in the lane when it's next to a semi or a car is too close to you. Well, bring that to the regular versions because it did not slow down for oncoming traffic on the ramp for me. Or if it was doing it, it wasn't doing it very well. Coach says, shadow driving is a major way the system learns. The car compares what the driver did with what it would have done. Well, it's kind of, based on the videos I've seen, it's kind of hard to tell when FSD is doing something wrong or doing something slow. Like, that's what I hear a lot of the time about people testing it is like, it's very awkward. It's like, I turn it off because it's embarrassing and it's annoying other drivers, not because it's doing something dangerous. Which, if you had to choose between embarrassing or dangerous, I guess embarrassing is better. But that's probably influencing a lot of the code, too. Code Universe says single stack won't fix much. We don't know. It hasn't happened. Remember, yeah, they said that inverse summon was around the corner and then it just didn't happen. Tesla Vision doesn't work that well for me. Whenever I back up in the driveway, it always thinks something is behind me and asks me to stop. Uh-oh. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people saying that the removal of the ultrasonic sensors was a really bad idea and that it's not going to pay off. Like, there's been all these people, which, I mean, I hate to be rude, but it kind of makes me laugh hearing about all these people that are dinging up their cars because there's no park assist. The only reason I laugh is because my last car has no park assist or any ultrasonic sensors of any kind. There's no camera. There's no like lines. There's no ding that tells you when you're getting close to something. And I never once in 6 years of driving that car ever hit anything at any parking space. And I've parked in tight parking garages. I've done parallel parking. I've never run it into anything. So I'm just not used to having it. And I'm glad I have it now. But seeing all these people like, I got my new Tesla and in the first day I rammed it. That's sad. And I don't wish anybody to damage their car, but I just visualize everybody driving into the parking space like really quickly and waiting for park assist to stop them, and then they just hit it, and they're like scraping up their tires. And I'm sorry, it just the visual in the short term kind of sounds funny to me, but realistically, yes, that would annoy me too, and I'm very mad that didn't they didn't figure out how to do park assist via the occupancy network before removing the sensors. That was the biggest oversight. Is like, okay, if you found a way to do it with just the cameras, have that ready before you remove the sensors. The fact that it wasn't ready is a big concern and probably resulted in a lot of extra Tesla service visits because people had to get their cars fixed after banging up their driveway. FSD Beta is a baby flamingo trying to figure out how to stand on one leg. Doesn't know why, but it's trying to figure it out the best it can. It ain't pretty, though. The baby flamingos are cute. Mike with his analogies. Tech versus driver's IQ. Brandon says, will we ever get a 360 view? I really don't get why Tesla can't do it. It seems Tesla is too entitled to think they're too good to do it. No, I thought, I gotta find the overlay. Brandon, there's blind spots. That's basically why it can't do it. With the current layout of cameras, I found a visual of it. Green the Only, I don't remember where it was, but Green the Only tweeted it out once. Tesla 360 view. If I search blind spots, maybe I can find it. But someone overlaid, like, if you tried to do a 360 camera view with the current hardware, it wouldn't get all of it. Like, they're missing. So there would be big holes, basically, in the visual. Whoop. Don't go to sleep, car. Basically, I don't think it's from they're stubborn and they don't want to do it. I think it's because they've found a way. In their opinion, this is a cheaper solution to just have park assist, which basically means there will be little lines on the UI that appear when you get close to things, and it'll beep at you, don't get any too close, and then stop. It gives you the inches. They figure that accomplishes the same thing for cheap, and they'd rather not have extra cameras or extra hardware in order to achieve something. They probably don't prioritize that because in their mind it's not necessary for full self-driving. The occupancy network lets you remember the distance of things, but if you tried to have a visual of that, it would fall apart. Q-Man says, excuse me, sir, I subscribed to FSD yesterday and requested the beta. When shall I receive the software? Beats me. I think most people have said you gotta wait a couple days, but I've seen other people say you can get it within 5 minutes. So, yeah, like Coach says, make sure you're on Wi-Fi and that it shouldn't take too long. Coach says, thank you, Drew. People have become so dependent on backup cameras, blind spot sensors, and parking sensors. Well, I don't think that's necessarily their fault. If your last car had a backup sensor or a backup camera and it had park assist, you're used to that. And Teslas are very expensive cars. So my perspective is fairly biased because I was coming from an old car from 2007 that didn't have any park assist. So it's hilarious to me to find out that people are this dependent on it, but I never had it in all of my years, and now to find out that I guess a lot of people really rely on that. I just find it as kind of a nice little perk, but I didn't it wouldn't have been a deal breaker for me, but let's just say I'm very grateful I got my car when I did. Basically, with the information I was aware of at the time last year, I think I made the best possible purchasing decision I could. If I would have known about the $7,500 credit and the free supercharging miles, sure, it would have been nice to have waited, but then I wouldn't have gotten the standard connectivity for life, and I wouldn't have gotten the park assist with the ultrasonic sensors, and my charge connector would not have been included. So yeah, well, I would have gotten $7,500 deducted. The price of the vehicle was higher later in the year. And the California Clean Fuel Reward expired when just days after I took delivery. So it wouldn't have been $7,500 in savings. It probably would have been closer to $5,000. But again, we didn't know that. We didn't have the information on that. So it's very easy if you play if you would have done this, it's like, yeah, you can always do that. I can go back in time and say, wow, if I would have bought Tesla stock when it IPO'd and put every last dollar I ever made in Tesla stock, then I would have, 8,000% grown my money, but we didn't know that. So, yeah. How many different fart sounds can a Tesla make? Ooh, great question. Let's find out. 1, 2. Okay, that one's called I'm So Random. I think that's just shuffle. That's the not a fart, I think. Let me try that again. If I select not a fart. Nope, that's a different one. Oh, I think that was Neurostink. Let me try Neurostink. No, that's a different one too. Short Shorts Ripper. That's the one. Short Shorts Ripper. Falcon Heavy. And Ludicrous Fart. And my favorite, Verified Fart. And Boring Fart. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Grand total. Didn't Elon say a bird view will be part of FSD? I don't remember him ever saying that, personally. J22 said there's no down-facing camera for the front in one of the mirrors, so it just wouldn't work for 3D camera view. Yeah, it's not a software problem, basically. Which sucks, but I think that assuming you have a Tesla with ultrasonic sensors and park assist, that basically accomplishes... I know it's not exactly the same, but the core principle of don't hit thing that you are close to works. And I don't find myself missing it. I've been in cars that have the 360 view thing, and they have to kind of stitch a lot of different angles together to get it to work. It doesn't, like, when you get close to certain objects, they move like this at first, and then as they get closer, they move a lot faster. So I don't find it that much more useful than just the park assist lines, personally. So I don't think it's a big deal, but yeah, it's definitely not something that can be added just through code. Highway autopilot is already so good. If there's a car in front of you in the city, it's like FSD. I mean, I hear a lot of people say that. Highway autopilot is so good already. And I'm like, I did a road trip with it, and it made a lot of mistakes. The phantom braking was terrible. Still, when it sees a stopped car, it doesn't decelerate very gracefully. And when the light turns green and cars start moving, it accelerates way too slowly. Even without chill mode turned on, I tried it without chill mode, and it still was not I still have to push the accelerator. Yeah, I don't think it's... I mean, it's great. It's cool that the car can drive itself and stuff, but I would not say it's, like, basically done. I would say, no, there's a lot of room for improvement. J22 says, he said the bird's eye view would be vector space, aka what FSD beta shows now. It will get more and more detailed like it has been since it came out. Oh, I see what you're saying. So if the bird was a cyborg, it's a bird's eye view. That's essentially what you're telling me. I could see that, but that only works so much, because how can the car remember what, like, if you park the car in a tight space, when you come back to the car, is it going to know if you move things around a little bit? You know, like, my guess when they removed ultrasonic sensors was that they were going to be able to 90% recreate the same feature with the cameras. But I think there would be edge cases where it was worse, but they just wouldn't be common enough. Like, the example I could think of is, so the car is basically looking at its surroundings as you drive up to the parking space. So even though the camera can't see in front of your hood because it's too forward facing, it will remember those objects as you get closer. So even as those objects go out of the camera's view, it can remember, hey, there's an object there, so it's getting closer. You're about this far away from it. So that works, and then you park, and then you're good. But for instance, if someone walks out to their car, the car, when it boots up again the next day, is only going to remember what it had last seen the last time you parked it. So if something has moved to behind or in front of it while the car was off or, asleep, even I don't even think they'd be smart enough to incorporate Sentry mode and stuff, but still there's blind spots. So if like a cat or a little dog walked in front of the car, you can walk right in front of the Tesla and have the camera not see it. So that's not going to show up in the occupancy network. So you get in the car, you put it in drive, and that's going to be a situation where the car is like, yeah, go ahead. And then it would be really sad, but it's an edge case. It's not a very common one. I don't think that's a super common situation. Hopefully the driver is aware of if a dog or cat is running around, but that's a situation in which the ultrasonic sensors would be able to say, hey, there's an object in front of the car, don't go. Whereas the occupancy network would be like, I can only look up here, and it's fine by me, because when we pulled into this space, it couldn't see what was directly in front. So, Game Master, how do I say this? Game Master KS says, I forgot, what's phantom braking? Basically, just when the car brakes at high speed for no reason. I'll be on the highway, perfectly clear, nothing in front of us, and then all of a sudden, it just starts hitting the brake, and we slow down a lot. Makes everyone in the car really uncomfortable, and then it accelerates again. No reason, but it absolutely, on the San Diego trip especially, completely ruined the road trip experience, because I was constantly worried the entire drive that it was going to start phantom braking again. And for long stretches, for like it would be very long gaps between phantom brakes. So you get to the point where you're comfortable and the car's doing the driving and you're not thinking about it, and you're like, okay, this is fine. Okay, we're good. I'm relaxed. We're having fun. Some people in the car were just kind of drifting off, going to sleep, and I'm just relaxing, listening to my tunes. And you'd be like that for a good hour and a half even. And then all of a sudden, it hits the brake. Everyone wakes up. Everything, if you had food set down here, it just slides off. And then there's a car behind you that's coming up really close now, so you have to accelerate so you don't get hit by the car behind you. It's like, knowing that can happen at any time really ruins the trust and the reliability in the system. Elon has claimed that eventually FSD will dodge potholes, but I haven't seen evidence that it actually can. I think it's going to struggle a lot with figuring out what is a pothole and what is a just patch in the road that doesn't actually have depth to it. It's just a different coloration. And what's road debris, and trying to fine-tune an algorithm that can only use a 1.2 megapixel camera to detect all those things. I wouldn't be surprised if it never actually detects potholes. Let's see. Thinking back, the cameras were placed exclusively for autopilot use. The other uses were added after people asked Elon for features. Is that right? I'm sure the backup camera was there for more than just autopilot, but yeah. Does FSD ever accelerate to get ahead of traffic merging to right lane, or if safe, gracefully change to left lane? Well, that's more highway driving, which FSD beta doesn't really do yet. So I wouldn't say that gracefully if it does do it. I recently did a 500-mile trip to Vegas and back in the Model X, and it didn't phantom brake once, thankfully. The only issue is when the traffic slowed down, it doesn't accelerate and decelerate smoothly. I agree. It's something that when I see traffic is stopped and I'm on autopilot, I know that it's going to see those cars and come to a stop, but I know it's going to do it in a very uncomfortable way. So I just turn it off most of the time. If I see the traffic stopped, I'm just going to deactivate it now, because if I don't, it's going to do this accelerating. It's going 70 miles an hour and the cars are stopped, and you can see that they're stopped, and you get closer, and then at the last second it's like, and then it brakes really, really hard right before. And they haven't fine-tuned that algorithm, at least on the free version of autopilot, which again has been untouched for years. Mike says, phantom braking is mainly due to sensors having conflicting observations of the vehicle. Phantom comes from it Phantom comes from it braking for nothing. Yes. I don't understand what conflicting information the car is getting, personally. When, in my experience, when it was phantom braking, it was just like wide open road of nothing, and I don't think it's using the front ultrasonic sensors. If it detects something that close to the car, slowing down from 70 to 50 isn't going to make a difference. But Brandon says, is autopilot supposed to stop for red lights in emergency situations? I had autopilot on the other day and don't have FSD. I wasn't braking early enough and the car started slamming on the brakes. No, it's not supposed to, but I disagree with that. I don't like the feature set currently for the free autopilot. I think it would be okay if it didn't go at green lights, but it should stop at red at least. I feel like that's a safety thing. Like if someone turns on autopilot and then they pass out or fall asleep or heart attack, whatever emergency event may come up. Basically right now the way it's structured is if you didn't pay for full self-driving, the car will run red lights and run through stop signs. But if you pay extra, then it'll stop. It's like, that kind of feels like paywalling a safety feature. Eli says, in 15,000 miles, I've never had any bad phantom braking issues in my Vision only Model 3. It occasionally slows down a little for no reason, but I just keep my foot near the accelerator. Well, I'm happy that it's worked well for you. I'm not denying your experience, but I'm telling you what happened with me. I'm glad you haven't had the same experience, but I cannot say from my own driving that I think that it's great and it's so good. Like, there's a lot of things that I have to turn it off for pretty frequently. Ivan says, fun fact, the slider on the bottom when on autopilot isn't for car distance, it's for time to react. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why they would put the car icon and with the number going out, but the time to react, it doesn't follow either. Like, I set it to 7 car lengths, or in your case, the 7 seconds time to react. It does not give you 7 seconds. It doesn't even give you like 4 based on my experience with it. And it's definitely not 7 car lengths. There's a lot of situations where I have it set to the largest possible following distance and it still gets very, very close. Or at least let that feature be separate and affordable. No, I don't believe in paywalling safety features. I think if there's a part of the code that can save someone's life, you should not be charging money for it. That's just wrong, in my opinion. Especially a very basic, line of code. There's certain things that are, life-saving, but you need hardware for them to work. So I understand that, where it's like, we want people to have this, like the new iPhones have car crash detection. So it's like, you need to have a new iPhone for this feature to work. Okay, that requires certain hardware. This is not that. This is like, there's specifically a line of code that can be added that if someone passes out or falls asleep at the wheel, the car could save their life. And okay, it causes a traffic jam by them stopping at the stoplight, but I would rather them cause a traffic jam and have people honk at them and convince them to wake up or go up to the car and realize, something's wrong. This person's having a heart attack or whatever. They need help, call an ambulance. They're not waking up. That would be better for them to stop at the stoplight than just go all the way through it and hit somebody, which could kill them or others in the intersection. At least that feature, yeah. Base autopilot will not react to traffic lights. That's correct. A Honda Fit with sensing slammed its brakes on one time. Not fun. Definitely not fun. Do the ultrasonic sensors make dogs howl? I don't think so. Even if Tesla did paywall safety features, it's nothing special. The German brands always do that. I don't care who does it. I'm just saying I don't agree with it. That's wrong, in my opinion. Like, if you want to say that stoplight recognition is a feature, then let it go when it turns green. You can charge extra for that, but don't charge extra for someone's life being saved. Car spacing should be braking distance at given speed. Braking distance? What, my braking distance is 7 car lengths? I don't think that's how that works, because you can adjust it. So if you set it to 1, that's not, yeah. The phantom braking sensor conflict can also include map data. It's not just visible data. I'm thinking back to the situations where there was phantom braking and it made no sense. It was very long stretches of I-5 with nothing around. There was no conflicting map data from what I can remember. All right, Brandon, better attend to the wife. Have a good night. Yeah. What time is it? 4:30? Yeah. I better get working. I do have an EV video coming today. I'm trying to I don't know how long I'll keep this going, but I'm trying to get more consistent with content. I'm trying to do a tech stream and an EV stream and kind of go back and forth throughout the week and still make time for the videos. So I'll probably wrap it up here, but I appreciate the super chats and all your guys' good questions. And just to recap everything, I'm not excited for Investor Day because I feel like it's going to be filled with a lot of promises they can't keep, similar to previous autonomy days and battery days, where the people that are sold on Tesla will continue to be sold and the people that doubt Tesla will continue to doubt. So I would basically rather them just deliver. And I hope that there's something tangible. Best case scenario, they announce a cheaper Model Y at this event. That would be cool. I know the faster you go, the greater the distance. Yeah, but the car spacing is adjustable, so you could be going 80 miles an hour and set it to one car length. So that's braking distance is going to be subject to your speed, not what you set the. I don't think that's what that is. But anyway, thank you all for tuning in. I'll catch you all in the next one. Have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.